Come guys, I want to show you something else. We're not sitting here. Forgive me, Mom, forgive me. So actually over here, there's a model that shows you the retaining wall and the house that was built into it. And then this is where my imagination goes a little wild. And the gospel according to Yoni. And I start imagining to myself, first of all, who would live in such a house so close to the king? It must have been one of his loyal men. And I could always imagine that maybe Uriah the Hittite's house was over here. And maybe this would have been Bathsheba, that little lady in blue. And she'd come here on this rooftop taking a shower. And David up there looking down. Hello. And who knows if this was the house or not. But we do remember reading about that David had some sons and daughters, quite a few wives actually, and some of them that were born in Hebron. Amongst them was Absalom. And we remember the story of Absalom, how he took revenge against his brother who raped his sister, his Amnon and Tamar, and he kills his brother, and then he has to flee, run away from the kingdom. He goes to grandpa's kingdom to the north of Shul, and later on he would come back here, and David allowed him to come back and made peace with him. But Absalom was a little bit in a hurry to take his father's place, and he would actually be almost an opposite of his father. When we read about David, we read how he does everything to unite and to take all the power from the tribal leaders and to have one government over here with Jerusalem as its capital and him in control. You read how Absalom would come and win the minds and hearts of the people that would come up to judgment, how he would say to him, oh, if only I was king, of course I would be on your side. And as they would come down to bow to him, he'd grab them by the beard and give them a nice smack in the mouth, kiss them. And
like the politician kissing babies.
Yeah, by doing so, he would get the hearts and minds of the people. He would probably promise them, I'd give you back your powers that you had before my dad. And by doing so, he even got some of David's advisors, a certain man by the name of Ahithophel the Gilonite. And Ahithophel was so smart, his advice was so precious, that I even think that the Bible writes that his words were like the words of the living God. They compared his words to the words of God. And he would come up and he would take side with Absalom, and when the time was right, he says, okay, now let's go, let's capture Jerusalem. And by the time David hears it, it's already too late. And him and some of his men, they have to run up the Mount of Olives. We'll walk down tomorrow, you'll see what that means, when he was running up the Mount of Olives. And that's the first time the Mount of Olives is mentioned in the Bible. And it says that as David was running, he was crying. And by the time he makes it to the top of the mountain, two men greet him. One of them wants to join him, an elder guy, also an advisor, Hushai Ha'arki. And he says to Hushai, no, you can't help me, you just slow me down. If you really want to help me, I heard that Ahithophel the Gilonite is with Absalom. Go back and whatever Ahithophel advises, try to counter-advise that. Another man meets him from the house of Saul, and he curses him and throws rocks at him. And at that time, Joab wants to go kill him, I think, and David says, let him be, who knows, maybe he was sent by God. to do what he's doing right now. So he lets him live, and thank God, because he would be an ancestor of Mordechai eventually, and it wouldn't be so easy without a Mordechai. But anyhow, David runs off. Hushai HaArki comes back. When David runs, he leaves his concubines at his house and he goes off. And as Absalom comes into the city with Ahitophel, the Gilonite, Ahitophel tells him, calm down, you're not there yet. We're still establishing this kingdom. And he was welcomed as the next king of Israel coming in here. Old David ran away and cried on the way. And Ahitophel tells Absalom, well, now you have to show all the people that you're the man. Take your father's concubines on the rooftop in front of all of Israel and make sure everybody sees that you're the man. And indeed, he does in front of all of Israel. And then Ahitophel says, now give me about 10,000 men, and I'd go down and chase David and put an end to this and establish your kingdom. And at that point, Hushai HaArki stands up. And he says, oh, Your Majesty, I don't think this is a good idea at all. What? Everybody says. You don't think Ahitophel the Gilonite has a good idea? What are you talking about? And he says, well, everybody knows David. This is a man of war from his youth up. This is the guy who slain Goliath the Philistine. And he's a professional soldier, I'd have you know. And you may think he's running for his life, but no. He is actually laying an ambush, expecting and waiting for you to do this thing exactly. And as you go up, maybe you won't lose, but it will be a bit of a defeat to have fallen into an ambush. And at that time, Absalom actually chose Hushai's advice rather than Ahitophel's advice. And Ahitophel, being a genius that he was, the minute he saw that they did not listen to his advice, he knew it was only a matter of time now. So he goes to his house, finds himself a tree, and he hangs himself. Today we have in Hebrew something called Atzat Ahitophel, saying the advice of Ahitophel. Atzat Ahitophel, Etzah. So it's like has a bad connotation to it, Ahitophel's advice. But by reading the Bible, you see that his advice was actually good. David was running for his life. David was fleeing. And it would have been a good idea to listen to his advice. So why is it such a bad thing when you think about Ahitophel's advice? And I'm assuming the whole idea in the beginning to raise your hand against the anointed of the Lord, that was the bad idea. And why did he do that if he was such a genius? And this is where some of the genealogies come in handy, because you will read in one place that Ahitophel had a son by the name of Eliam. And in another place you would read that Eliam had a daughter by the name of Bathsheba. So Ahitophel was Bathsheba's granddaddy, and he did not like how David treated that situation. She was married to Uriah, a Hittite, not even a Jew. But this man, he must have been very loyal to David, to serve in David's army. And David saw his wife, Bathsheba, while he was fighting his war. He saw his man's wife, and he must have liked what he have seen, because he called her up and he got her pregnant, and then he tries to hide what he did. He calls Uriah the Hittite to come home and go be with your wife. And this guy, I can't help but to admire him, man. He says, me go into my house while all the other guys are in the fields. He couldn't be Israeli. Because we're so horny, man. No, it's been he doesn't even go home. And now David's in a problem because she's gonna soon show this pregnancy that I'm responsible, and now I have no way to hide it. So what he does next is he calls Uriah the Hittite and he writes a little letter and he says, give this to Joab when you see him. He gives him his own death warrant. And we're talking about a man who was beloved by God according to the scriptures, it says, talking about King David. And now he's a murderer too. And he sends Joab to his death, and I could imagine when he sends not Joab but Uriah the Hittite to Joab, and Joab, when he reads the orders saying make sure this guy doesn't come back from the battle, and did everything go okay in Jerusalem? Oh well. And they do something that they should have known better, because a few years better they did the same mistake, and usually the army learns from mistakes. Assaulting a city straight up against the wall. It doesn't seem like anything good could happen from that. To Avimelech, a lady threw something on his head and killed him. So I guess ever since then there was a rule, never assault the city straight up according to the wall, and that's what he does. And a whole bunch, I think 70 guys die in that assault. And when he gives word to David, he says to the messenger, make sure you add that Uriah the Hittite died as well. And when David hears that, oh, it was God's will, I guess. And Nathan the prophet would come to David and tell him a story about this guy who had one little sheep, and this other guy had so many. He was rich, but when it was time of sacrifice, he didn't want to take his own. He took that guy's little sheep, who was like a daughter to him, lived in his house and slept in his bed. And David immediately got up and told the truth. That guy's a dead man. And he told him, that guy is you. So that was the story of Bathsheba. And who knows if this was her house or not.